At the start of the Bible, we find this fascinating story about Adam and Eve living in the Garden of Eden. In this perfect paradise, everything is as it should be, completely harmonious. However, there's one thing they're warned about, a particular tree that God specifically tells them not to eat from. It's dangerous, and if they do, it will lead to death. Sounds simple enough, right? Just stay away from that tree and all will be well. But here's where things take a turn. In this garden, there's a snake, and it begins to tell a completely different version of the story. According to the snake, eating from the tree won't kill them. In fact, it will give them knowledge and make them like God. Adam and Eve are convinced by the snake's words, and they go ahead and eat the fruit. The consequences are devastating. The once perfect garden is lost, and evil and death make their way into God's world. Now you might be wondering, why is there a talking snake in the garden? That's a big question. It's odd, and what's even more curious is that the Bible doesn't explain why or how the snake got there in the first place. It just introduces the snake as a creature already in rebellion against God, aiming to pull people away from God's goodness and steer them toward death. Whatever this snake represents, it's the embodiment of evil that continues to affect our world and lives to this day. There is hope, though. Right in the middle of this story, God makes a remarkable promise to Adam and Eve. He foretells that someone will come in the future, a descendant of Eve, who will crush the serpent's head and destroy evil at its core. However, during this confrontation, the serpent will strike at his heel. It's a vivid image of mutual destruction where both will be wounded, but evil will ultimately be defeated. This strange yet beautiful promise lingers until the next pivotal moment in the story, when God chooses a man named Abraham. God tells Abraham that through his descendants, the goodness and blessing that were lost will be restored to all nations. As the story follows Abraham's family, we arrive at one of his great-grandsons, Judah. Judah receives a promise that a king will emerge from his lineage, a king who will bring peace, harmony, and abundance, overflowing with food, wine, and milk from vineyards. It's a vision of an incredible future. The first king we encounter from Judah's line is King David. He's a heroic figure, and for a moment, it seems like maybe he's the long-awaited snake crusher. But like the rest of humanity, David is flawed and infected by the same evil. Instead of defeating the snake, he succumbs to it. Despite this, God makes a promise to David that a future king from his lineage will eventually come. However, as the story unfolds, generation after generation of David's descendants fail. They fall into the same traps of evil, chasing after wealth, power, sex, and false gods. Things get so bad that Israel spirals into complete ruin, and the mighty Babylonian Empire wipes them out. With no kings left to fulfill God's promise, it seems like the whole plan has completely fallen apart. Yet even in these dark times, a group of prophets rises up, continuing to speak about the coming king. They keep reminding the people of the promise that this king will one day defeat evil and restore the garden to its former glory. One particular prophet, Isaiah, sheds more light on why this promised king would be wounded. Isaiah reveals that the king will suffer because of humanity's evil, and this suffering will ultimately lead to his death. But then something unexpected happens. He comes back to life. Isaiah explains that because the king endured this wound, he can now become a source of healing for others. The Old Testament ends, and the long-awaited, snake-crushing king still hasn't appeared. That's why when the New Testament begins, it introduces Jesus of Nazareth, not as just any person, but as the one who comes to fulfill these ancient promises. We find out that Jesus is from the line of David, Judah, and Abraham. As he travels throughout Israel, he announces the arrival of God's kingdom and begins to confront the effects of evil, healing people and forgiving them of their sins and wrongdoings. As Jesus gains followers, many come to believe that he is indeed the long-awaited king. However, Jesus reveals a surprising plan to his closest disciples. He explains that his path to kingship and peace will come through bearing the full weight of humanity's evil, what could be seen as the deadly bite from the serpent. For a moment, it appears that evil has triumphed and the story might end in defeat. But in a remarkable twist, Jesus rises from the dead, turning what seemed like a tragedy into a victory. With his resurrection, Jesus now holds power over both evil and death. The New Testament goes on to declare that this power is available to us, enabling us to confront the effects of evil in our own lives. Despite this, evil and death continue to plague our world. Yet the Bible concludes with a powerful promise, a future day when Jesus will return, bringing the final victory over the serpent, fully eradicating evil and restoring the garden's original goodness here on earth.